Hi everybody, my name is Shasta Garcia and I'm the host of Shasta's Journey. This show is all about my path to purpose, and along the way I am so blessed to meet so many incredible people with stories that could teach, heal, or inspire, so please sit back and just enjoy. On this episode, I want you to question yourself and to think about, have you ever wondered where God was, if he really had his hand on the situation, if he was really there for you? Because the story that you're about to hear today, she had quite a few moments in her life where she questioned that, where she wondered where God was. But at the end of the day, you look back and you see that God continued to be faithful throughout all of those years. And so please enjoy, and I hope that you are inspired. And I just want to thank you so much, Laurie, for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I've known you for several years. You are an amazing woman within our community, and you wear lots of different hats, and I'm sure that people know you by a bunch of different titles. But could you tell people a little bit about yourself? And
my name is Laurie Giannetti, and I'm live between San Andreas and Mountain Ranch on a historical ranch that's been owned by my husband's family. I have two incredible daughters, an incredible son-in-law, and a granddaughter, which is so fun. So, that's who I am. And I also happen to manage the fair, so the fairgrounds. So I've been really blessed. And and I'm also the director of children's ministries at my church.
Like I said, she's a woman with many different hats, and God blesses her throughout all of that. How long have you been managing the fairgrounds?
Since 2011, but I've worked there in some capacity for 25 years, 26 years, somewhere in there.
How did that opportunity kind of come about? Was it something that God put on your heart?
Well, it's kind of crazy, but I have a bit of a fashion background. And so...
Oh, I could not tell. Not at all. No, she looks incredible.
So they were looking for someone to step into the Miss Calaveras program, and because I had done fashion shows and things, they asked me. And just one thing led to another, and doors closed, but then other doors opened, and so that's where I am.
What type of experience did you have prior with the fashion shows? Was that kind of your heart at that point?
I worked for Macy's when I was young, and I went through their management program. And so, it was in that period of my life, it was like a really great job because, I love clothes. It might even be an idol in my life. I'm not sure, but I love clothes. And so, there was great clothes, and I was learning so much and worked in all these different departments and went to San Francisco and did all of these things. And so that's where it sort of started. And
how have you been able to use those experiences and opportunities that God has placed in your life to bring him glory?
Well, I don't know. My passion, your passion, as you grow older, your passions change, right? And so a little bit about me. I am a church girl. I love church. I mean, it's like my thing. I love church, And so, I love working with kids. I'm surprised I'm talking to you without a flannel graph and some glue sticks and construction paper.
I'd be fine with that.
Because that's how I usually,
throw some sparkles in there.
Because that's how I usually teach. But, so growing up, we were that church family. My parents married very young, and so when they were in Arkansas, they met two wonderful couples who they're still in our lives today, and they introduced my parents to the Lord and to faith. And so growing up, it was always just part of who we were. And so my first kind of experiences that I remember was a little Baptist church, Deanza Baptist Church. The pastor was Dale Barker. My Sunday school teacher, I'm like 5, right, was Jean Couture. That was my first vacation Bible school, which I'm a vacation Bible school addict. I love VBS. I mean, really. I
seriously love your heart. You don't hear it very often. If you are a church girl or a church guy, you should totally email me because I need to see how many other people totally can relate, because you hear it all the time, Like, well, I mean, like, I believe in God, but like, I don't go to church or
Yeah.
anything. You know, I hear that all the time.
And I'm not, and for me, you know, and I get that though, and I've experienced that. And so growing up, we were this family of four with the station wagon with the panel on it, you know, and there was a time my dad studied and he got his minister's license, and so there was a time that he felt that he was called to Arkansas where his family was, and so we spent about a year there and went to these little mountain churches, and my dad would preach, and me and my brother, my sister, my youngest sister wasn't born yet. We would sing. We can't sing, by the way, but we would sing. And because people just expect that a minister's kids can sing, you know, so it's not always true. But so we would sing, and we went to these little small congregations who did that.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, we did that for about a year, and then when we got back, my dad did a lot of convalescent ministry where we would go sing again, you know. And so then we got really active in a church that, we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Tuesday, Thursday. My middle sister actually went to school there, and it was all we did.
Very involved, very involved.
And it was the atmosphere was very controlling, very restrictive. And so we went there from the time I was about in 6th grade. And, you know, through my teen years, we were there. There were no movies, there were no dancing, there were no cards, there was really no fun in life, really, you know. And so, and there was a lot of, there was a lot of fear. And it took me till my adulthood to learn that when the Bible speaks about the fear of the Lord, it's the awe, it's the respect, it's different than how I perceived it. So when I was 15, my dad didn't come home one night. And so, and I remember the fighting, I remember everything. And my brother is 18 months younger than me. My sister, who was 10, pretended she was asleep. And my sister, who was 4 at the time, was asleep. And he didn't come home. And he never came home again.
Mom.
And so we tried to keep it kind of to ourselves. My mom had some really serious medical and mental issues after that, and had to be hospitalized. And my aunt drove us back and forth to church. We tried to keep it a secret at first, you know. And then it wasn't a secret anymore. And some really hurtful things happened. And my 10-year-old sister was saying, if you were just prayed through, which is a term I really hate, but if you were just prayed through, your dad would come back. If you kids would pray more, if your mom was a better wife, those were things that were said to us. And so even today, I think the church doesn't know the church as a whole, not just that specific church, but doesn't really know what to do with divorce. And especially in the late 70s, they didn't. And it's one thing to, get a divorce and then maybe you start going to church. But when you have two people who are church leaders and get divorced, the church doesn't know what to do with that, right? When there's no reconciliation that was going to happen. And so from that point, so my, and I would pray and pray and pray and pray, and I just couldn't believe this was happening to my family, because we were the family, right? we went to church 4 times a week. I mean, God, how can this be happening to my family?
What was that like going through that experience? I mean, first off, people had high expectations of your
Yeah.
family and who you guys were because you guys were church people
Yeah.
and you guys were involved. And, you know, I get that, you know, reaction from people too. You know, people say, oh, well, you're a Christian talk show host and you do all these things. And like, they put you on a pedestal and in reality, like.
So basically, it was awful. I can't even explain. It was awful. And I was a daddy's girl, and it was awful. And there was another party involved, like there usually is, you know. And so we eventually, that happened in January, and by March, my mom was like, I have to get you guys out of here. We can't do this. We need support. We need help. And so she moved us to Nevada, and so that was March of my junior year. We moved to Nevada, and my grandparents were there. Her brother was there. I had aunts. We had family. We had connections there. And so I started a new school March of my junior year in high school. I started a brand new school. And my brother was a freshman. My youngest sister, who had been in, my middle sister, who had been in private school, started in public middle school. So it was like all of these changes. And
did you still have a relationship with God? Because I know when you're younger and you are going through stuff,
it's hard.
I knew the Lord for a little bit when I was younger, and then I got bullied, and then we moved, and after we moved, I really lost touch.
So my mom took us to a church, and they were nice people. I mean, you know, my brother and I went to youth group a little bit, I think, and my sister went to a program called Missionettes. But the problem is that church didn't know what to do with the divorced woman who had kids. I mean, so, you know, I think the church as a whole has come a long way since then. But there were, you know, so she didn't feel real welcome. She didn't feel real comfortable. She was getting a job. She had been at home, and she always did daycare, Tupperware, Avon, you know, but she was always at home. So she had to do things differently, you know, and then there's all the grown-up things with alimony and this and that and this and that affect kids, that aren't supposed to affect kids, right? Kids should not have to pay for grown-up decisions. And that's something I say all the time. So we went to church a little bit, you know, and I went to church. I actually met my first boyfriend went to that church, so I kind of went a little more than my family did. My middle sister went to a midweek program all the time with the neighbors. So, and then my senior year, my mom met my stepdad. And so she moved to Calaveras County, and after graduation, I went to college, but she came here. And so then the girls went to, my sister Amy went 8th grade and high school here. My sister Bonnie went from 1st grade up. My brother finished school in Nevada because that would have been 3 high schools for him. So anyway, and then in, you know, college and all of that, and just really trying to find myself, trying to I didn't have a sense of home anymore. I had lost my sense of home, you know, because even when I went to my mom's, my brother wasn't there, right? You know what I mean? And so we had this different dynamic, this kind of blended family going on. And so I just made some really bad decisions, you know, and I was not, you know, leading that life I always thought I would, you know, being so close to God and all of this. Being the perfect church girl. I was not.
Yeah.
I was not the perfect church girl. I was hurt. I was insecure. I was angry, you know, all of those things, you know, and then you start looking for it in the wrong places.
And how has that experience of, you know, being identified as the perfect church girl and then totally, I mean, doing everything opposite of what you thought you were going to do. How has that allowed you to really minister with the children
It
and
has.
with your own children?
Yeah, it has, because, you know, as I've gotten older, I start to understand things that I didn't understand before. And so, you know, and then I started with my fashion stuff with Macy's and all of that, but I still had this hole. You know, I call home crying. I loved my job, but I call home crying. You know, if my mom told me my sisters were doing something, I'd be really upset. So I eventually, through all kinds of different experiences, moved home, and like about a year and a half later, I met Daryl. And we had so much in common because we had both been raised in church, but both weren't attending at the time. You know, he grew up going to San Andreas Community Covenant Church his whole life. His mom, you know, they had this connection there. And
Do you guys both attend to this day?
Yeah, well, he doesn't attend as much as he should.
Well.
well. But yes, that's our church.
Okay.
That's our church. And so, and then we got engaged, we got married, and we started our family, and we knew that we needed to be in church. So that kind of started us attending again.
So you
when I
didn't
was
go
pregnant.
into the relationship with, you know, being very focused and centered with God.
No. No, we were both in the same place, you know, right? But we both knew, and we had some really great premarital counseling with Pastor Carl Johnson. And so we both knew when we started a family, that's what we needed to do. And so
that probably set up a really good foundation for you
it
guys.
did, because we were both raised that way.
Do you suggest that other people that, you know, might not be centered and focused in Christ to do that as well?
I do, because I think it's so important for our kids. And, you know, I mean, and it's really important. And as I've grown and learned more, you know, I mean, family dysfunction is biblical. I mean, if you've read the Old Testament, okay, and even the New Testament, they are dysfunctional, right? So God hates brokenness. But God uses broken people. I mean, David, he was probably one of the most dysfunctional people in the whole Bible. And the Bible says that he had a heart, he was a man after God's own heart, right? So God doesn't expect us to be perfect people. And that's something I had to learn. I had to learn that there isn't a perfect church girl.
I am still learning that. And, you know, I think we can all relate to this. I really do.
There isn't, you know, there's no such thing as a perfect church girl. That doesn't exist. And so when I work with kids now, I get them, because my program, the kids in my program, some live with grandparents. Most are in a blended family. You know, some have a mom that's only attending. Some have, you know, are just coming with a neighbor, or, you know, and so they're from all different places, right? So I get that. I had a student about 6 months ago. I say, hey, how are you? And she said, well, my parents are getting divorced. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Do you want to talk about it? Right? Because I understand that. I understand the brokenness. I understand the dysfunction. But I also have come to learn that we have an amazing God. And God uses our brokenness, right? So, and I tell my Sunday school kids this, you know, worst thing that probably ever happened to me was my parents getting divorced, all right? But look what's happened. I married Daryl. I have 2 beautiful children. And marrying Daryl was like a homecoming, because he was so rooted. And he's, you know, he's such a pillar of salt. And he was so rooted in his family and where he came from that, you know, he offered that to me. And even his roots in the church, because, you know, they had been going there. Yeah, you know what I mean? So all of that. But I wouldn't be teaching. I wouldn't be managing the fair. I wouldn't be doing all of those things if my parents stayed married. And I'm not saying that God liked my parents' divorce, because I think he hated it. But
he has used it.
But God can use brokenness. And we see that all through the Bible. I don't know of a perfect person that God used.
No.
right? You know, and
Besides Jesus.
yeah, right. Well, that's a little different.
Yeah.
Jesus is God. So,
I know.
So,
Way to be confusing here,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
I know. And I always kind of joke that, you know, he had to elect Mary to have Jesus so young because she wasn't messed up yet.
Seriously,
right?
though.
Because children have such great
I love it.
faith.
I love it. God wants us to have, you know, a heart
children
like a child.
So I really think, like I said, that God hates brokenness, but God uses brokenness all the time. And God is a God of grace, and He's a God of, you know, and are things going to be easy? No, because He never guaranteed they would be easy.
Nope.
And, you know, life is hard, but our God is a God of grace. And, you know, true faith, I think, is, and my pastor has said this before, is true faith is knowing that God can and He doesn't, and it's still okay. And you still have faith.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
That's true faith, you know. And so, and I think, so with, you know, my whole thing with kids now is they, you know, our pastor always says to them, you are made on purpose and for a purpose. Children need to realize where their identity is.
So true.
Their
So
identity is they are a child of the living God.
I wish I knew younger. I really did. You know?
And because if you're solid in that, I mean, I was solid in, when I was young, I was solid in scripture, I was solid in rules, but I was not solid
in your identity.
In my identity. That no matter if my parents got divorced or if I moved here or if I moved that, I was still a child of the living God. You know,
and that still goes with you, despite whatever age you are.
Yeah.
You are a child of God, and I love that.
And
you know?
so, I think that's just so important because kids, you know, their insecurities and their identities, and they, you know, they get wrapped up into so many things. People do too.
Yeah.
Adults do too.
True.
But, and you know, and some of those are good things, right? You can get wrapped up into something really good.
Yeah. You know, I've wanted to ask you because I see this all the time, you know, people often think that, you know, when they see their parents smoke or drink or get divorced, all of a sudden, you know, they're doomed. Did you go into your relationship with your husband now with any sense of worry or anxiety that things might turn out the way that it did with your parents?
A little bit, but, you know, he really... you know, my husband is just so easygoing. He really is, you know. And so, you know, and I did a little bit in the beginning, I think, you know. But I think that we've definitely worked through that, you know. And we've been married 30 years.
I was just about to ask that.
30
That's
years.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And we really like each other.
So great to hear after 30 years.
Yeah,
like,
we really like each other, you know. And so, and we're enjoying this part of life, being grandparents, you know. We have recliners, right? So, anyway, so I think a little bit, but I think, you know, you affect your kids so much and you don't know you're doing it. Right? And so, and one thing I will have to say is another byproduct from my parents' divorce is my siblings and I are super close. You know,
I'm really glad to hear that.
We were really fortunate that all of the outlaws like each other too. You know, so we just travel like a pack. I mean, if one kid is graduating, we're all there. You know, and so that's just, and we're very different, you know. I
think we all are in our own little ways.
Yeah, I mean, I have just the last presidential election, you know, some of us voted for Secretary Clinton, some of us for, you know, Mr. Trump, some of us for Governor Gary Johnson, you know, some of us served in the military, some of us served in the Peace Corps. We teach school, we jump frogs, we ranch cattle, we are in the medical field.
I still don't think I've jumped a frog.
Oh my goodness. But but at the end of the day, we laugh and we love and we weep and we pray and we do life together. And I always say, we're the American family. All these different opinions and different, things, but we still love each other tremendously. And so that's really a really great byproduct, because I don't know if we would have been, because we went through some really tough times together. And my youngest sister, who's 12 and a half years younger than me, I feel like I even sort of raised her, because it's just when you're the oldest, that's what you do.
Yeah.
So, and I really loved that role, but
I'm sure God has taught you some tremendous things through everything that you've been through. And, I highly encourage you guys just to look back on everything that you've been through and really see how God has used that to shape and mold you into the person that you are today. I know that I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for the things that I've been through. And I know the same goes for you, just seeing it throughout your story. And, we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, because identity is such an important thing. And, besides being, the coordinator for the children's ministry and managing the fair, what would you say your identity is?
So I think you have to get that in order, right? I am a child of the living God, right? So my relationship with my sovereign, I need to keep it the first thing in my life. Second thing is my marriage. Third thing is my kids, right? And then my job and my ministry is after that. Because I think when you get that all confused, right? So, but I think I am just, a mom and a wife and somebody who jumps frogs and loves agriculture and kids.
I love it.
But I'm just making imperfect progress, I am not perfect.
What a good point.
I am not perfect. I am making imperfect.
Me neither.
I am making imperfect progress, and I, like everyone else, I'm a sinner, but I have a great God. So, I have a God of love and a God of grace, and I've just been so blessed. And when you take the time and really trace the hand, I love that term, of God's faithfulness, and you can see where we don't always know everything, right? We don't know everything. But when you can start seeing how this worked that way and this worked that way, and you kind of can look back, I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I hear from people, I don't have a story to share, nothing has happened, but let me tell you, even the people who, grew up in a Christian family, and maybe they don't have that moment where they truly came to Christ, but even the people who, grew up as a perfect Christian girl or a perfect church girl, there's still a story. There's still a story there. So I highly encourage you guys, whatever walk of life that you guys have been through, please share it, because God gave you those stories and experiences for a reason. He wants to use your hurt and pain to bring him glory, and don't use it as a thing to knock you down, but use it as something to empower you and bring you closer to God. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the show.
And and really God works through broken people, because there are no perfect people.
Yep.
So God uses brokenness over and over again.
It's okay to be imperfect. And I hope you were taught, healed, or inspired. And I just pray that God blesses you in everything and anything that you do, and just do it for his glory. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting me. Go to shastasjourney.com.